You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. In a sense, both of my guests today are women who are bridge builders. The first is an artist who builds bridges between art and science. She's trained in both, actually. And the second, well, she's a woman who builds bridges between the extreme Orthodox life, chosen in her case, of a Jewish woman in a fundamentalist situation, and the outside world. And the bridge she built was a book after she escaped. Two fascinating stories, but first, we need to go inside the headlines. South Korea has been in the headlines a bit lately, so let's start inside there. Abortion is illegal with the exceptions of rape or the woman's health, and even then she has to get permission from her husband or a cohabiting male partner, or face a year imprisonment or fines of almost $2,000. Women's groups have been pushing to overturn the ban, and the Constitutional Court is set to review a case challenging the law's constitutionality. Late last year, more than 23,000 people signed an online petition calling for legalization of abortion. The bizarre reality is that the ban is rarely enforced. South Korea has the 10th highest abortion rate among the 35 mostly high-income countries that are members of the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, with an annual tally estimated as high as 500,000 or more procedures a year. On that subject, Britain's Supreme Court struck down attempts to overturn Northern Ireland's restrictive laws on abortion barely 2 weeks after Ireland voted in a landslide to do away with such rules. But the court acted only on a technicality in the case, and in a crucial caveat, Justice Brenda Hale, president of the court, said that a majority of the justices are of the firm and clear opinion that the current law is incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, to which Britain is a party. That, in effect, is an invitation for another such case, technicalities absent, as the court has signaled its sympathy for women's reproductive rights. Updating the case of the missing 2018 and possibly 2019 Nobel Prizes in Literature, there's good news for women from Stockholm, where the Swedish Academy is still in convulsions. A Swedish prosecutor has filed rape charges against Jean-Claude Arnault, the man at the center of the recently surfaced scandal that has so badly damaged the reputation of the Academy. 18 women, including the Crown Princess of Sweden, had come forth alleging this man's sexual assaults over 2 decades. It's been more than 3 decades since the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in Ukraine, but this story, like its subject matter, has lasting impact. In villages as far as 140 miles away from the nuclear plant of Chernobyl, radioactivity readings in cow's milk are up to 5 times the government's official limits for adults and more than 12 times the limit for children. According to scientists at the University of Exeter in Britain and the Ukrainian Institute of Agricultural Radiology, radiation will remain above the adult level until at least 2040, and above the child's threshold even longer. People know that the milk is unsafe, but they told researchers that they have no choice. They have to feed their families. They are feeding their families death. Radioactive fallout from the accident was detected worldwide, but the worst of it fell in Ukraine and Belarus, a ghastly accident that, apparently, continues to happen. Back here in the United States, so-called Attorney General Jeff Sessions seems obsessed with leveling draconian policies against women that are so dastardly, I'll take them up later in greater detail in Fighting Words. But I do want to balance the daily disasters of the Trump regime, of which Sessions, of course, is only a part, with a tip for feeling better. The primary results continuing across the country, building toward November elections. GenderWatch2018.org is an excellent place for details about those primaries, a gift to you and me from the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers, since here we lack the time to cover these races every week. So check it out, GenderWatch2018.org. The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine have just issued a scathing major report about sexual harassment at universities. The panel offered 15 detailed recommendations, some of which would upend long-entrenched practices like overhauling academic advising systems, so students and junior researchers aren't dependent on one senior researcher for an advisor who controls advancement and access to grants. The report urges legislators to pass laws allowing for filing harassment lawsuits directly against faculty, and not just universities, and so employees who settled harassment complaints cannot keep them confidential. The 311-page document, for which research had begun well before Me Too, notes that universities and other institutions have been focused on symbolic compliance with current law and mostly on avoiding liability and not on preventing sexual harassment. And in closing, this little factoid. Only about 3% of commercial pilots and fewer than 5% of airline chief executives are women. That's according to the International Civil Aviation Organization. And yet, women pilots, like women automobile drivers, generally have lower accident records than men. Are you feeling safer now? We have to take a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with a woman who is an expert in art and an expert in science, and knows how to use each to help inform the other. And also coming up is the Surrealism Corner. So don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Did you know that science and technology once meant the same thing, and that science/technology, that same thing, was also the same as art? Yeah. Technikon, the word itself in Greek, technikon means that which belongs to techne, which is technes, T-E-C-H-N-E in English. Techne is the name not only for the activities and skills of the craftsperson, but also for the fine arts and the arts of the mind. So in that context, techne overlapped in meaning with the Greek poesia, which meant the process of creating, revealing, and bringing forth. It didn't mean just something vaguely poetic. Anyway, techne and poesia, science, technology, and art, creation. Yeah, good things. And my next guest knows about both of them. Angela McQuillan is the curator at the Esther Klein Gallery in Philadelphia, which is a gallery with a mission to bridge the gap between art and science and technology and provide a resource for the community. It's part of the University City Science Center. She herself is an artist, and she's here today to talk about my two favorite things, art and science, and how they relate to one another. Angela McQuillan. Angela, welcome to the program.
Hi, Robin. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited about your work, both as an artist and as a curator, because you're mixed media, but that's the least of it. It's that you're mixed subject matter, overlapping, interconnected subject matter, art and science. My favorite things. Talk a little bit about your work. I mean, on your website, it's, you're quoted saying, "I'm interested in the processes that happen inside of a living entity that are invisible to the eye, yet essential to life." Talk a little about that.
Okay. Well, I started out, before I went to art school, I was working as a lab technician in a cancer research lab, and I would do a lot of studies looking at, doing microscopic imaging and fluorescence microscopy, and working with zebrafish, where we'd work with their eggs. And I got really interested in kind of like the micro world that happens beneath the surface. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting and beautiful subject matter, which really influenced my artwork. So I think, my color palettes, when I do really bright and colorful paintings, they're definitely based off of fluorescence microscopy. And I think all of my work has some type of like anatomical or organic quality, which I just, I love looking at, like Grey's Anatomy or the inside of bodies. I think there's just a really unique aesthetic.
It's so cool, and they're so beautiful, those images. I have a friend who recently went through a process of surviving a lymphoma. And while she was in chemo, she was very curious as to what this particular kind of lymphoma, actually the cellular structure, looked like. And so she went online, and discovered, photographs, microscopic photographs of it. And oh God, it was so beautiful. and so she printed them out and she carried them with her. Look, see what I have. And the people, the people at the infusion center thought she was slightly crazy, but it was beautiful. And what fascinates me also is that the micro world, the patterns and the formula, the structures seem very, not reminiscent, but they seem to echo the macro world. I mean, if you look at
totally
cosmology and stuff. Talk a little bit about that, because clearly you recognize that.
Well, I did a little sort of a residency at the University of Pennsylvania last summer in the Complexity Systems Lab. It was called the Penn Network Visualization Program. And we did a lot of studies on network science and kind of how we could apply artwork to networks and visualize them. And we found that, looking at a social network or looking at a neural network or any kind of network, they all kind of have similar structures and ways to predict them. So I feel like, a network of microscopic cells could be similar to a network of stars in the universe. I mean, I think it's all based on mathematical equations and patterns, which makes it extremely interesting.
Thrilling, actually, thrilling. I think of writers like Lewis Thomas or scientist writers like John Wheeler on the cosmological and natural sciences scale. But I don't know. Are there many painters? Clearly, since you've been curating at this gallery in Philadelphia, clearly you have found and commissioned and encouraged there to be more artists who are working in this general area.
Yeah, I think that science and art, the sci-art community, as we call it, it's a small community, yet it's growing very rapidly, and there's a lot of diverse artists working with scientific topics. Not only painters, but there's like new media artists working with digital ways of art making, or a medium that I'm interested in a lot is called bioart, where a lot of artists work with biological materials like cells or DNA when they create their artwork. And I think with all the scientific developments that happen, so rapidly, there's all these new ways that we can create art and explore the world around us, and that's why I think art, science-based art is very important.
It's as if science is the discovery of. I'm just playing with this, but it's as if science is the discovery of everything that is outside our consciousness, e.g., quote unquote, real. And I do mean that ironically. And art is the discovery of everything that's inside our consciousness and having the imagination to pursue both. But
I like that.
But they're so related, not only as you say, the patterns, but the processes of discovery, I think. I often thought if I did not turn into a writer, and had not been, seduced and obsessed by words from the time I could remember, that I would have been some kind of scientist. And the older that I grow, the more fascinated I become with science.
The beauty of a lot of the artists that I work with, they kind of have that same viewpoint. Well, they're an artist now, but they wish they could have been a scientist. But the thing is that what we can discover is that they can. Mm-hmm.
In the
through their artwork.
Through the artwork, yeah. Because say more about that. Because art goes where nothing else goes. No,
but I think I just started a artist residency program here at the Science Center, and we really encourage artists and scientists to work together and encourage artists to have an interdisciplinary approach. So maybe they're not just using the mediums that they're familiar with, but they're branching out and maybe performing scientific experiments and acting as a scientist in order to, learn more about their artwork or learn more about the subject matter.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Is there pushback, do you find, from scientists on this? Do they think, these crazy artists, what do they think, they can dare dabble? I mean, so
I wouldn't say that they don't want artists to dabble, but more that some scientists don't see the importance of art. And I think it's, I've definitely met some really great scientists. Ben Dorrance is the CEO of Integral Molecular, where we're hosting our residency program, and he's very interested in art, and he sees the value of the collaboration and how artists can provide a new perspective on the research that they do at the company. So I think that having an open mind will really provide a very new and interesting outcome.
Will it ever? And there are enough in what you call the small sci art community. There are enough artists so that clearly you can continue curating shows at the gallery.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of artists working in scientific topics, and hopefully by curating this type of work and providing a resource to the community, artists who didn't really know that was an option can get more involved and can get inside of a lab and see the processes of artists who are already doing that type of work.
Interesting, because a number of scientists whom I know think that they, had they a choice, they would have been artists.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's...
Well, they're both very creative disciplines.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you wrote this beautiful mission statement on your website. Among the things in it is, I'm interested, you wrote, in the ability of science to solve problems while ultimately creating new ones. And I think that art is important in this equation because it allows us to reflect on the power of our own knowledge and take a closer look at the implications of how it can alter our society and our environment, both the inner and the outer again. Isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of scientific discoveries don't always take into account the ethics and cultural implications of, the technology that they're developing. So artists can play a very unique role in kind of exploring that territory, which is very important. And I think it's almost as important as the scientific discovery itself.
The deeper we go into, who knows, perhaps it's incredibly shallow compared to what we don't know. I mean, there's 90% dark matter. But as we go deeper, the ethical questions seem to get more common and rise more frequently. So that you're quite right. There is a very distinct role there to play that art can speak to. It's a wonderful balance that coming out with 2 degrees, one in science and one in the arts. You sure found a brilliant way to balance it. And you found the actual place where it itself intersects, which is, which is very, very exciting.
Well, thank you. When I started out, in my education, I wasn't really sure. I liked both art and science, and I was very torn, and I wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go, and I had no idea that I'd be able to do both things.
Yeah.
But I'm very appreciative that I have this job and I have this opportunity.
And your own art continues.
It does, yes. A lot of my own art is, I don't really experiment with biological materials right now. I do more traditional work with like fiber art, textiles, painting, stuff like that. But I definitely explore microscopic forms and patterns. So that's what I'm interested in at the moment.
They're so beautiful when you look at them. I bet people reel out of your exhibits and the ones at the Esther Klein Gallery in another space.
Yeah, I think we definitely provoke a lot of interest in both the scientific and artistic communities, and I think it's really interesting also when we have our receptions and artists can talk to scientists and kind of have this crosstalk and sharing of knowledge, which is great.
Yummy. Just yummy. Thank you, Angela, for being with us and helping to educate us. And we will be on the lookout for work by Angela McQuillan. And anybody who's in Philadelphia should stop by at the Esther Klein Gallery, right? Where you are curating. So thank you. And I hope you come back and talk to us again.
Thank you very much, Robin.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Not sure this week's corner is funny, although it's funny odd. It's about culture and tradition, and what in hell they actually mean. Case in point, a choir master in the Eastern Cape region of South Africa had teenage schoolgirls present a semi-nude traditional performance that was then widely shared on social media. He defended the performance as a cultural tribute to the Xhosa, South Africa's second-largest ethnic group after the Zulu, but it drew the fury of women. Ironically, South Africa's new post-apartheid constitution guarantees wide-ranging equality and shows real signs of feminist consciousness, although that conflicts with the high rate of sexual assault and violence against women in the country. It also conflicts with the reverent way many in South Africa regard tradition, and a sensitivity, understandable, about tribal and cultural issues. The choirmaster told the Daily Dispatch, quote, "We are proud of our Xhosa tradition, proud of Xhosa women and girls," close quote. But Angie Motshega, the Minister of Basic Education, called the performance completely inappropriate and added, quote, "Educators should know better than to expose teenage girls to this form of exploitation. There is nothing wrong with being proud of your culture and heritage, but there was absolutely no need for these children to perform naked," close quote. The so-called reed dance is performed each year in rural societies in Swaziland and KwaZulu-Natal province. It derives from a tradition of virgins dancing for the chief or the king in hope of being chosen for his harem of multiple wives. It is danced by teenage schoolgirls clad only in small aprons, with their breasts and their buttocks completely exposed. A report recently published by the Ministry of Basic Education noted that schools were grappling with the effects of racism, colonialism, and apartheid, but that, quote, little attention has been paid to gender issues. The previous emphasis on great white men has simply been replaced with great black men, close quote. That report, again, is thanks to Minister Angie Mochega. Her voice echoes that of women from the Zulu ethnic group with whom I met and spoke with at length when I was in South Africa. Tozy, one of the women who had walked for 3 days to attend this meeting, smiled and introduced herself as an unruly woman with pride. She said she knew she'd be in trouble when she returned to her village, not like some of the others, trouble from a husband. She had no husband to fear, but the village leader hated her and might use her absence to incite other men to burn her hut down again or steal her goat. Still, she felt it was worth it, because she wanted to tell the visiting stranger about the then-current Zulu use of so-called tradition. In particular, a tradition that had sprung up during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, justifying the shocking lie that if a man was infected, having sex with a virgin could cure him. Tozy said, "This is killing our young girls," and she was willing to risk her life to stop it. Another woman at the meeting, Zandile, said, quote, "We live lives bound in Zulu or Xhosa traditions, but they're not our traditions or customs. They're men's customs. We have never had a chance to establish our traditions as Zulu or Xhosa women. But at least we can start by stopping. We can stop obeying traditions that are not our own." At the time, and today still, the profound radical wisdom in those words strikes me as a call for the entire global women's movement. Child marriage? Sati? Female genital mutilation? Tradition. All male boards of directors? Dowry, battery, prostitution, purdah? Custom. Male majorities in congresses all over the world, male heads of state all over the world, religious rituals and rules, strictures, damnations, exclusions, hypocrisies, slavery, serfdom, monarchy, systemic racism, all of it culture, all of it tradition, all of it patriarchal. What if we were to go through our days piercing the facade of normalcy that surrounds the concept and the word tradition? What if we were to precede it always with the word patriarchal? From the Passover Seder to the Catholic Mass, from foot-binding to the casting couch, from the concept of a male god to patriotism itself, all patriarchal traditions, not ours. And what if women, and men of conscience as well, were to withdraw our loyalty, obedience, and respect to and for those traditions that discriminate and oppress? To start by stopping. It would begin with the naming, I think, as usual, but action would unavoidably follow. And there might come a day when we, or those who follow us, would look back and wonder how we could ever have endured such bondage, and perhaps celebrate our path to having freed ourselves from it. And that celebration will become a tradition. As it stands now, patriarchal tradition masquerades as the real thing, which, when you really think about it, is simply surreal. Time for another brief pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back in just a moment with my next guest, who converted to Hasidic Judaism, the most extreme fundamentalist part of it, suffered under it, almost died under it, escaped and lived to tell the tale. Coming right up.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. My next guest is Leah Lax. She is a feminist, an LGBTQ advocate, and a writer, the author of a number of books. She has won awards in both fiction and nonfiction, and her work has been included in numerous anthologies. Her work for stage includes major productions with both the Houston Grand Opera and the Houston Symphony, and have been broadcast on NPR. The book she's here to talk about today is about her life as a member of the Hasidic Orthodox Jewish group, the Lubavitchers, which she entered at age 16 and in which she remained for 30 years, slowly charting her way toward escape, about which this book is. It's called Uncovered, and it has just been announced that it will be translated into Arabic by the new nonprofit Ideas Beyond Borders under the umbrella of Democracy Now! So here to talk about Uncovered, How I Left Hasidic Life and Finally Came Home, is Leah Lax. Leah Lax, welcome to the program, Leah.
Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to meet you.
Well, nice, right back at you. The book is called Uncovered, How I Left Hasidic Life and Finally Came Home. I'm so glad you came home. I'm so glad you left Hasidic life. It is a memorable book. You were only 16 when you migrated, as it were, from a secular, liberal Jewish family to the world of Hasidic Judaism. How did you finally come to dare write the book?
My mother was a professional artist, and I think I had that in me. I think at some level I always knew that if I ever found my way out of that world, that I would be in my own type of artist. I would become a writer. Mm-hmm. And I had a career as a writer for a while before I wrote this. But it kept intruding on everything else. It's almost like I had a conversation with this book to be and said, okay, if I write you, will you then let me write other things?
Exactly.
So I finally did it.
Wow. You write in the book this insightful statement that gave me a window into not only Hasidic life, but religiously fundamentalist life. You write, maybe we're all frozen in pre-adolescence. Most of us never learned how to rebel or explore. Look at us, like children young enough to think their parents, in your case the law and the rabbi, omnipotent. But of course you were different because you wanted to form questions. And you finally... The book seems a search for home, for coming home. And I kept wondering, what was it that drove you from this seemingly liberal home where your mother was an artist and your father seemed to be this urbane, civilized person? And then, of course, part of the way through, we learn what drove you there. But it took such uncovering to unlayer that, the child sexual abuse. Talk a little about that.
I think that you had to follow the book and see the uncovering layer by layer until you come to it somewhere in the middle of the book, because there were definitely other factors as well. Mm-hmm. One is the fact that I was a child of refugees, or my grandparents were all refugees. Mm-hmm. And they were fiercely driven to assimilate into American culture and handed me a very attenuated identity. And the Hasidim said, no, we're the authentic ethnicity that your family abandoned. Mm-hmm. And so part of my journey into the Hasidim was an effort to find out who we were, mm-hmm. who we are. Mm-hmm. But along with that attenuation, so often comes fragmentation and trauma in the families. Yeah, I think that I think it's all part and parcel. Yeah. There's the inheritance of trauma and how it trickles down through families. There's that, and then there's how utterly ubiquitous child sexual abuse is. far beyond, I believe, more than the average consciousness ever has.
Yes.
And yet there's the girl and the budding artist who still wants to know who she is and feel safe at the same time. Yeah. I was fleeing into what I perceived as safety.
Yes, yes. I mean, they
had rules.
We know exactly. We know that one of the results of child sexual abuse that is now made it into general public consciousness is when women go into the sexual exploitation industry. We know that it has a result in various self-destructive or seemingly self-destructive behaviors, because the woman blames herself, and is taught to blame herself as a child. But this is the first time, and we've known that it often occurs in fundamentalist families where repression of, an affirmative human sexuality is common. And I've always suspected that there was this element in religious fundamentalist societies in Judaism as well as in Christianity and Islam and all the other patriarchal religions. But I've never seen it so clearly delineated as here, mixed with the same toxic brew, identification with one's past and one's forebears, a seeking for self. I mean, all of those elements that combine. I've heard that story from women fighting fundamentalist Islam. I've heard it from women escaping Christian fundamentalism, but I don't think I have ever heard it so clearly and so with such articulate power as a writer about the Judaism community in fundamentalism as from Uncovered: How I Left Hasidic Life and Finally Came Home. So I congratulate you on your courage, my dear.
Thank you. Jewish orthodoxy is focused, I think, on sexuality, but there were so many rules to try to guarantee that sex was kept both holy and pleasurable and private. I'm sure that it gave me, at the time, unrecognized, but a sense of safety. Mm-hmm. Sexually, a sense of safety. But of course, their rules are so narrow that there's no room for spontaneity and there's no room for any model other than heterosexual, which became a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah, well, of course, there is in Reform Judaism, and I mean, I know of lesbian rabbis, which is a nice development, but that's, you don't find that in the Hasidic community. And you were Lubavitch, which is the one that with Rabbi Schneerson and that really top-down, almost royalist society, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was, and you mentioned the sense of being in adolescence because, or being pre-adolescent, because once you come into adolescence, that's when you're questioning authority and figuring out what your own rules are for life and testing rules. Nobody ever dared come to that point. So yeah, the Rebbe embodied that father figure that was a symbol of unquestioned rules that were not only all powerful, but all wise, unquestioned. I said unquestioned twice now, but I guess that's ringing in my head.
Yeah, it is. I mean, another thing that just staggered me as I read the book was the sheer volume and ceaselessness of the work that the women do. I mean, I sort of knew this intellectually. I think everybody knows that when all you have to do is see a photograph in the newspaper of a Hasidic woman trailing 5 kids or more after her with the long skirt and the wig and the covered head and the cast down gaze.
That was me.
That was you.
Yeah.
But the sheer volume of not just keeping a kosher kitchen, but feeding a family, a horde 3 times a day, nonstop for decades and decades, it just takes the breath away, and the laundry and the cleaning and that all of this is holy work, except that it's not really considered, it's just considered something you do because you were born with a vagina and a womb and a clitoris, but nobody's paying attention to that one. How did you survive all that work?
I don't know that I would have. I know that I became, as most of the women do in that environment where birth control was forbidden. You know, my 7 children were born in a 10-year phase. I actually had 9 pregnancies in all. But we have to remember and talk about that ninth, that night that changed everything. How did I survive it? First of all, I was so deeply in it that's how I defined myself. My children were the definition of my being. So I got through minute by minute, hour by hour. But it's just that all of that suppression started creeping up at night. And I developed insomnia, and I was pretty well plagued with erotic lesbian dreams that didn't very well fit in the daytime for a Hasidic woman. So the fatigue was amazing. How did I survive? I'm thankful every single day that I finally had to confront something that was non-negotiable in that world, that I'm a lesbian. If I'd been a straight girl, I don't know if I would have had the justification in my mind to do that to my children and leave.
Wow.
I don't know. I question that. I think being, finding myself in a non-negotiable position and then finally falling in love was my great catalyst. And I can't promise you that I would have survived. We're certainly getting ill.
Wow. Well, you did get ill. I mean, with that 9th pregnancy, you almost died, and the doctor said, this is it. You cannot have another child. But then it took jumping through hoops and from a disapproving rabbi to get permission not to have another child for a tubal ligation. Talk a little about that.
Well, I want to, excuse me, but correct that a little bit. I nearly died with this, with the 7th birth. And I hadn't mentioned in the book that there was an early miscarriage. So it was really my 8th pregnancy. The 9th one, when I became pregnant again, I had 7 children in the house that were under 10 years old. The baby was born premature, and he was still very, very tiny. The one before that was still a toddler, and I was pregnant again. And I knew that this time I might not survive. I just knew. Your body tells you.
Of course.
Your body tells you even when you've been trained not to listen to your body, to only listen to the rules about your body. It was a body scream.
Yeah.
And I knew at the same time, for the first time in my life, that if I didn't overrule these rabbis, that nobody knew what I knew. And that I couldn't take the risk of letting them make the decision for me. See, we were taught that our bodies don't belong to us. They belong to God, which means they belong to the rules and the arbiters of the rules, the rabbis. Yeah. So I knew that I would have that abortion no matter what I lost, because I wasn't going to die. I wasn't going to let my children lose their mother. That was a primary thing for me. And I did have that abortion. But once I wrested control and made a decision myself about my body, I owned my body. And all of a sudden, I owned my life. It changed everything. It is the great turning point in the book.
Yes, it is, and it's profoundly moving. Oh, Leah, congratulations on your courage. I hope that the rest of your life is as delightful and affirmative and celebratory as that part of it was difficult. I know that your children are beloved by you and made it through. And one of the things that's so touching about the book is your grief about having been a communicator of those rules and those values to your children. But they got mixed messages from you, and I'm sure they still love you madly, and you're living a life that models a very different kind of values and anti-rules for them. So congratulations, and thank you for the book, which again, listeners, is called Uncovered: How I Left Hasidic Life and Finally Came Home.
I just want to add that my book is dedicated to my covered sisters, and it has wound up being a tool for outreach into other fundamentalist communities, including the hugely growing ex-Muslim community. It's led me to all kinds of wonderful and interesting relationships, we have so much in common.
How great is that? Wow. I mean, it really, you can't stop it when women begin to talk to each other.
And to listen.
And to listen and compare notes. Wow. Way to go. Thank you again, Leah.
Thank you so much.
And now we have to take one last break. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'll be back in just a few seconds with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. Donald Trump's world revolves only around himself. So, of course, he feels that Jeff Sessions betrayed him by not protecting him from Mueller. Trump apparently doesn't notice or care that on every other front, Sessions has initiated policies and actions, especially but not limited to immigration, that would have made Heinrich Himmler proud. At this moment, hundreds, perhaps thousands, since no one can get an accurate number, of children, including infants, are traumatized in detention centers now so crowded the Justice Department is investigating tent cities to house them. They've been forcibly separated from their parents, with whom they were traveling to the United States, being smuggled in, according to Sessions. Most of those parents, let's face it, were mothers, seeking asylum. But although U.S. law mandates that asylum seekers are entitled to respect and to full investigation of their claim before any adjudication is made about their right to stay, Sessions has de facto canceled that law and sent out the word to agents of ICE who have gladly acted accordingly. So, if you come claiming certain death and deprivation in the country that you're fleeing from, before you even have a chance to prove that, you are detained, for which read arrested, and your child is snatched from you and detained elsewhere. Even with the internment of Japanese Americans in camps during World War II, a lasting stain on this country's history, even then, families were kept intact. This arbitrarily cruel policy has shocked most American citizens and most of the world, plus even a few Republican congressmen and senators. Now Sessions has moved to change U.S. practice regarding asylum definitions themselves. He has made it virtually impossible for asylum seekers to gain entry by citing fears of domestic violence, domestic abuse, and/or gang violence, thus reversing an immigration appeals court ruling that granted asylum to a Salvadoran woman who'd been sexually, emotionally, and physically abused by her husband. In fact, immigration judges are claiming he is now usurping the role of the courts. But few asylum seekers are granted permanent entry into the U.S. anyway. In 2016, for every applicant who succeeded, more than 10 failed. Domestic violence victims gained eligibility after the 2014 case of a Guatemalan woman who had suffered a decade of marital abuse, including acid burns and punches while pregnant, so severe that her baby was born with bruises. Under the Obama administration, more women were permitted to claim credible fears of domestic abuse. That's gone now. Sessions wrote in his ruling that claims by aliens pertaining to domestic violence or gang violence perpetrated by non-governmental actors will not qualify for asylum because, he wrote, asylum claims have expanded too broadly to include victims of private violence, by which he means basically violence against women. It's instructive to remember that just a few years ago, Amnesty International, that supposed beacon of freedom that currently defends the institution of prostitution, plus Johns and pimps, held that same position. Private violence, non-political violence. All through the 1970s and 80s, we feminists pounded on the doors of AI, but they insisted that since almost all persecution of women was in the home or in the private realm and not committed by state actors on political charges, it was outside their concerns. It took us decades working with persistent women on the inside, but we did change AI's mandate. Because here's the thing, women worldwide live in the private arena. We might staff protest movements and do all the work, but we rarely get to lead them. So the Putins and Erdogans and Kims don't go after us the way they do those male leaders on political charges. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is a rare exception who apparently feels that accusing women who want to drive with treason is a reasonable charge. But that's rare. So if you restrict asylum to those being persecuted by the state, you have virtually eliminated women. Rape, sexual assault and harassment, stalking, battery, sexual slavery, forced marriage, all these take place in the private realm, and some are even affirmed as custom or tradition. Economic impoverishment, which always lands heaviest on women. Environmental disaster. Women are the fuel gatherers and water haulers of the world, and 80% of the farmers in Africa are women. War. Women and children constitute 90% of refugee and displaced persons populations. Forced isolation in Purda and forced exposure in the sexual exploitation industries. All of this is apparently private violence. Let's say you're a Central American woman who has suffered decades of broken bones from a brutal husband. Let's say you were trained as a nurse, but you realistically now dream only of working as a home aide safely, peacefully in the United States. Let's say that your 2 sons were forcibly recruited for a drug gang. Your daughter was abducted by a different gang to serve them sexually, and finally, beyond despair and desperation, you flee with your 2 youngest children, one only 6 months old. You flee to the land of opportunity and safety. You claim a credible fear of return. But you're arrested without due process. Your 2 children are taken from you while they scream and reach for you, and you beg and vomit and faint from shock. And you find yourself behind bars, unable to learn where your kids are, unable to speak to them, comfort them. You only can wait, in terror, to learn you'll be sent back to your death, which will be private, personal, not political. The signs read, "Welcome to the United States of America, 2018. The signs should read, "The personal is political." Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes. You can also stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast at iTunes, at Stitcher, and at Google Play. Be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can check out my website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. My latest book, Dark Matter, New Poems, is available online and off wherever books are sold. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. And I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.